Welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis.
I'm Michael.
And we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. Some of the topics on the show range from theology, masculinity, movies, pop culture, philosophy, and many other subjects. We often talk about the people we admire and the wisdom they share. People such as Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, who we believe is the sage of our time. Michael, why are we here?
So this is part 2 with having Heather on, talking about masculinity, femininity, Beauty and the Beast, all things Beauty and the Beast, which as if you watched our last episode, it was pretty great. Just talking about masculinity, femininity, how we complement each other. That was already pointed out and shown so well in Beauty and the Beast. And yeah, we can just get into it. Heather, you wanted to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. If you watched the last episode, you'd know, but go ahead.
Like I said before, American through and through, conservative and everything like that. I love stories and their structure and their timelessness, especially folk stories and various stories in society, and how the archetypes apply regardless of generation.
Which Great. Is why we wanted to have you on here. So, Michael, you wanted to start with?
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned archetypes. I feel like in Beauty and the Beast, they really, really did a good job of showing two masculine archetypes, and even almost like a feminine masculinity in LeFou. So you had kind of 3, if you really think about it.
The weak mentally man is LeFou.
The bootleg.
Or the weak, like physically weak of thought and physically. And then there's Gaston, who's weak of thought, but not weak physically.
And you think about, in a lot of stories, there's like that bully, but then there's like the bully's like sidekick. Henchmen, sidekicks, right? That he has that just kind of follow along and just do whatever the bully says. And they just kind of laugh when the bully is beating up, whoever. And that's LeFou. LeFou's just like, there's a moment where they're storming the castle where LeFou's like trying to get some of the servants of he's like, and he's just kind of crazy, but basically not thinking for himself, but following Gaston's lead the whole time. And I wanted to point out something that I really was thinking about last time I was watching it last night, which was how Gaston is like a toxic masculinity. Really, I mean, I hate the word toxic masculinity, but he really is. He's a masculine character he's selfish and self-aggrandizing, and it's all about him. But his venom completely has the village entrenched in his evil escapades, right? You see the moment where he wants to basically force Belle to marry him by using her father as leverage, right? He goes and he has an exchange with the evil Undertaker, or not Undertaker, but the psych ward.
Asylum.
and he has this evil exchange, right? And no one plots like Gaston, right? Like that's part of the song that you see him in. He's like, no one plots like Gaston, no one takes cheap shots like Gaston.
Yeah.
And then the next scene you see him in, he's plotting with the psych ward. I guess the administrator of the psych ward? I don't know, but
the creepy guy.
And Heather, you would know probably more about this in just your study of history and stuff like that. But my wife mentioned she's just like going to a psych ward in the what this is the 1600s, right?
Early 1700s is when the original story was written, and I think that's when Disney based
early 1700. Okay, so going to like a mental hospital, that would have been like a death sentence. You probably would have been locked up and kept in a cage forever.
It
right?
basically was. I mean, they have varying degrees of horribleness. I mean, there were some that tried their best to take care of the insane, but if you went in there, it was basically to remove you from society and to lock you away in a misguided attempt to not hurt other people around you. So you mentioned the creepy guy because he even points out Maurice is harmless. You're not supposed to put a harmless, crazy guy in the asylum. Yeah. And that's why Gaston pays him, because it doesn't matter if you think he's insane, he's harmless. But then they go after him by saying he's dangerous, which is kind of an invert.
That's a really good point.
And then when Belle says, and this is, and my wife pointed this out as well, but like the moment when Gaston kind of shifts, he shifts from, I'm going to put Belle's father in jail. She says, he's not the monster, Gaston, you are. And then he's like, well, you're in love with the beast. And then he takes the whole village. Okay. He rallies the whole village to go and kill the beast. And I did not know, like, just, I had subtitles on, and one of the parts of their song is they say, 50 men cannot be wrong. 50 Frenchmen cannot be wrong. Kill the beast.
Yeah.
Right. So he leads the whole village and a mob. He leads a mob to go and do something, and they're all convinced that they can't be wrong.
It goes back to Douglas Murray's Madness of Crowds, where go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Where Douglas Murray just posits in his Madness of Crowds book that you can easily control people by becoming a mob, and especially if you're charismatic. And Gaston's definitely charismatic, and nobody sees it. And Belle is the only intelligent one that sees through the charisma, right? So Jordan Peterson says this about Gaston. He says that Gaston is the persona that men will use. These are like the pickup artists, right? It's an unreal, moral man who's looking to only cause to get what they want. And it's a narcissist. He's only after what he wants, but he's charismatic enough that he's the persona. He's just made up a thing about himself so he can act like a certain way, and people think that he's capable when he's just manipulative.
Yeah, it's the shallow hero, I guess you would call it. He's not a true hero, but and I think you can see that in today's society. It's kind of like when you see an Hollywood actor,
politician,
politician, or like you said, you see it very well with, you see Hollywood actors put their viewpoint into politics without actually doing any kind of studying or anything like that into both sides. And then you have all their followers on Twitter just jump right on. Yeah, they're right. And you're just like, because it's easier to follow a shallow hero than it is to follow a true hero. It's very, very easy, because then if something goes wrong, you can honestly say, well, I didn't know. You can easily take no responsibility for following somebody like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's what the townspeople do. They're basically like a Twitter mob. Yeah. You know, and Gaston is a celebrity that's like, hey, we need to cancel this person. That's interesting. That's an interesting take.
What was your take, Heather? So the Gaston takes the villagers, and they go and they start to storm the castle, his servants actually go against the beast tells his servants, just let them come. And they're like, screw you. No, we're defending our castle. Which I think a lot of people might say that the beast was a tyrant, but in reality, the way he conducts himself with his servants, to me, he seemed very democratic, right?
Yeah.
Like he was the prince, the king, but of the castle, but they were allowed their perspective, their voice. Anyway,
people mistake his they think he's tyrannical, but he's actually nihilistic. He's just nothing matters.
He comes after Bell leaves him.
Well, he's that before Bell comes.
You actually see his leadership skills actually early on when I watched it as well last night, and I was struck by the you said the difference between the townspeople in Gaston and the servants in the Beast. The Beast is in a position of authority, and his servants never cross. They recognize that, they respect that position of authority. But through the whole thing, if they feel like they need to do something else, they go ahead and do it. And you don't see the Beast taking his anger, their disobedience out on them. Maurice walks in, Lumiere, he growls and he groans because he loses temper. He locks up Maurice. He doesn't touch his servants. Later on, when he demands Belle come down to dinner, they're talking respectfully to him. And then when he kind of pushes the line, they're like, all right, well, that's it. You need to stand up straight, act gentlemanly, and you must control your temper. Again, he doesn't slap them down. Later on, when he's at Belle's door, banging on the door, losing his temper again, they're just like, please attempt to be a gentleman. No one who thinks they're really a gentleman, who is shallow or anything, would take that from a servant. So he is in a position of authority. And I see this, you see this with a good teacher. They are in a position of authority, but their students would be like, hey, wait a minute, this is uncalled for, or I don't agree with this. You see this with other leaderships. You see this as probably fathers, when one of your kids are like, but Dad, I feel this way, or I this is what really happened, or they question a decision, and you then could use that authority to decide, well, I'm going to go ahead with this, or you listen. And the Beast listens to his servants. And Gaston, the township never questioned him, and I don't think would allow them to if he had that kind of authority. He actually has no authority in the town, but he kind of assumes it.
He just kind of takes it.
Yeah.
And I love the idea that the Beast allows himself to be open for counsel. Yeah. And I think that's really the relationship that he has with his servants, is that he goes to them for counsel. And there's several moments where he tries to adhere to their counsel. And
that's any good leadership. Like any good leadership book is going to say, listen to the people on the ground because they know what's going on. So if you're at the top of a company, you need to go down to the bottom if you want to improve the company. That's where like Undercover Boss comes from. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
That's where. So a good leadership is you're in charge and you make the last decision, but you're also open to any kind of criticism or suggestion.
Yeah, and that doesn't diminish your authority when you do so. It actually would increase the respect of those beneath you.
And then moving on with the story, what do you think is going on when the Beast is nihilistic in this moment? Belle has left and he's become nihilistic. He tells his servants, just let them come. And then Gaston comes in with a bow and arrow, and the Beast looks at him and just doesn't do anything, right? So it seems though that and then even after Gaston shoots him, and then he accuses the beast, too kind and gentle to fight back.
Yeah, it's this is where I think a lot of women could actually take a lesson from. Belle, in a sense, metaphorically breaks the beast by breaking his heart. And then he kind of loses that, as you said before, that kind of monster within, the savage within, that allows him to protect his own. And it's only when she comes back that he's like, all right, that's it, Gaston, you're going down. And it's really good because it shows the beast's humanity still. He didn't just become this perfect dude who would be able to handle everything. He still needs Belle. Even though he has learned to love, even though he has learned all these other things, he's regained his humanity. He's still flawed. He's still, without her, he's still, and it's again played in later when I taught you before, when Gaston yells out, Belle is mine, she's now vulnerable as well without the beast. So once they separate, they're both in this very, very bad place. She is going to be taken over by Gaston, and he's going to be killed if they don't come back together, at least in spirit. And I think it's kind of a metaphor, my personal opinion, that you're stronger together. He will find the strength to do what he needs to do with her there. And I find the ironic part is when she comes back, she doesn't come back and say, Beast, I love you. And he stands up. She just cries out, don't hurt him. It's the very fact that she came back that inspires the beast. He is still being selfless at that point. He doesn't know she loves him. It doesn't matter. She's there. He now has the strength. He needs to do what he needs to do. And he does it without any thought of what he could personally gain from it. And yeah, he does say you came back, but it's not in any kind of oh, you're mine now. Oh, you love me. Oh, we're going to be together happily ever after. There's none of that at that scene. That's coming.
He's
later.
Just glad she came back.
Yeah, she's just glad she came back, and that's enough.
So it kind of goes. This is kind of with children when it's important that you are together when you're raising children, and they've had million of different studies done.
Right.
The children who are raised by two loving parents usually do way better than children who are raised by one or raised by grandparents or whatever. So that is an interesting take on it, because when she comes back to him, he's better, and she's also better when she comes back to him too, because then she's not being terrorized by Gaston.
One of the things Gaston's, it's so creepy, the part where, and they have the lightning perfect and everything, where he says, it's over, Beast, Belle is mine. Yeah. And then the lightning, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's all theatrical, right?
Well, and in that moment, he's not attractive anymore. He's ugly. He's become a monster. Yeah. He's a monster. His trueness has come out.
Yeah.
And his was about possession, whereas the beast had allowed freedom.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
She's free to choose me to leave or to stay.
Yes.
Belle is mine. She's my possession.
That's my
possession. Have her no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when the beast that's really when you start to see the beast fight Gaston.
I love that. To me is my most favorite scene. I think I've told you, Michael, that before. He grabs Gaston after he threatens Belle, and he holds him over the precipice, and Gaston starts pleading. And then you see the beast's face soften. It is the first time in the entire story that you see him control his temper, but he's still angry. He pulls him in, he growls at him, get out. He is not this, oh, here, let me brush you off. Okay, just leave. No, he is still angry. He's still saying, get out of my home, stay away from Belle, get away from my people. But he controlled it. And the music changes there, and it's so perfect. In the live action remake, they botched that scene so badly that I almost didn't want to finish the film. Well, there was about 10 points that I didn't want to finish that film, but that's my most favorite scene, because he holds him out and he brings him in and he says, "I am not a beast." And it bugged me because I was like, well, yes, you are. You are a beast. Belle even calls you beast. You're a beast right now. You need to be. You have your humanity, you and all that kind of stuff. But for him to pull and tell Gaston, well, I'm not a beast, you're like, no, tell him to get out and you'll be beastly if you want to be, and you'll crush him if you have to be, because he's attacking your home. And it so bugged me when they changed that line. Well, in the original, it was so well done. It wasn't, he's still a beast, he's still angry, but he controlled his temper, he's in control of himself. And which makes him more powerful, at least in the eyes of me and any woman I've talked to. That's when he's like, that is the man we would like to be a part of. He controlled it.
It's the Jordan Peterson quote is a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very, very dangerous man who has it under control.
Right. And I think he's also the one who's mentioned the biblical verse, the meek shall inherit the earth.
Yes.
And then he said the old English word for meek meant something like, you have your swords, but keep them sheathed.
Yep.
And so, yeah, you can still be a monster within. You just need to control it.
That's why our logo has a sword on it. That quote.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And don't think I didn't recognize Andwulf behind you. So from Lord of the Rings.
I think that's what they needed to show in that moment, was that the beast had finally gotten to a point where he was in control. Right. That the temper, the anger, that was not in control. He was in control. And when the moment came that he could murder Gaston, not really murder. I mean, he would have been if he let him go, he would have been justified.
Yeah, he would have been legally justified, just like before with Maurice.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
He made a decision. Well, before it was always impulse.
That's interesting.
That's so
he
great.
Would have been justified like he was before with Maurice. But interesting.
It's funny that mercy is actually what shows his maturity and his greatness at that point, is mercy. But he still inadvertently kills Gaston. I mean, when he gets stabbed, he thrusts his arm back to cast him away from him.
Yeah.
And so it's like mercy only goes so far. But
and Belle saves him in that moment. Right. She grabs him.
Yeah, she pulls him from the edge.
So not only metaphorically, she's
strong woman.
She's a strong woman. And the whole idea that the strong woman needs to be a man, needs to have masculine traits, doesn't have any femininity, is such a dumb idea. But the fact that she grabs him, because he's falling too, right? He's had an arrow in his back. He's got a stabbed in the side. He's dying, and he falls backwards, and she grabs him.
Right.
So, and it's so great that they decided to do that, because it not only serves the story, but it also serves the metaphor, because the woman is actually saving him in that moment, even though he's saved her before.
Right.
It's that's an interesting take.
She pulls him back.
Well, she saved him from being killed by Gaston when she showed up.
Right. So
she actually probably saves him. She saves him more than he saves her.
Well, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I've seen this in real life. I mean, I won't betray any confidences or anything like that. I've seen men where a touch of a hand from their wife or girlfriend will bring a temper down, or when they start going down a path that will lead to destruction, they pull them back. Or one the biggest ones I've seen is men who are just done with it. They work day in and day out. They're tired. They just can't get up. There was a meme I saw that I thought, and it showed a man sitting on the edge of his bed in the morning, and he just had his head down. Like, what a man feels like every single morning. And then it showed his wife come up behind him and just touch him and says, thanks. And then he gets up and he keeps going. And like, what all he needs is her there saying, okay, it's okay. And then I heard an interview once where a man said, I'm already grounded when I come home and I just had a bad day. I don't need you to ground me. He was saying this to his girlfriend. He goes, I need you just to sit by me. And then all of it will just kind of drain away and I'll be okay. A lot of times today we think, oh, well, you need to tell me everything. And that's why you see a lot of women nag, I guess would be the most appropriate word, about their boyfriends not confiding them, not telling them what's wrong, not telling them all. There's like, well, sometimes he needs time and then he can decide to tell you or not. But sometimes he just needs you to sit there or just be there. And in Beauty and the Beast, you see that all Beast needed was Belle to be there to bring him out of depression. All he needed was Belle to be there to pull him from the edge of destruction. And when they're like, oh, well, weak women, you're like, how strong would you have to be to not necessarily be aggressive in trying to save a man? Just you being there is enough. You being a good woman is enough to save a man. And that's power.
How would you say that she needs him?
She needs him. You pointed out one, physical protection for one of it, but it's played very much at the beginning. She's the archetype of the romantic lady. And why I say the romantic lady is because she's a lady. She is everything. But she longs for adventure. She longs for romance, and she believes in the stories that she reads. And they, in her song of Belle, they say she has a dreamy, far off look. And her nose always stuck in a book. So she never gets to live the life she wants until she meets the Beast. Then she's thrust right into a fairy tale. And a lot of people forget that fairy tales, they say, oh, the happily ever after. Like, the happily ever after only comes after immense pain, sometimes degradation, trial. All of that is in every fairy tale I've ever read. Happily ever after only comes then. And there's all these side characters that don't get a happily ever after. It's just the ones that stay strong throughout those trials and everything. And Belle gets that. And at the end, she gets the adventure. She gets the romance and everything like that. And name one woman in history or anything who wants that, who can't have that without a man. And I know I'm going to get some feminists out there like, oh, we can have romance and adventure without a man. You're like, yeah, but that's not fun. I mean, it's fun to feel appreciated. It's fun to go on a massive hike. And even though you can carry your own pack, to have somebody lean back, a guide lean back and say, hey, is that too heavy for you? Do you need help? And you're like, no, I got it. I'm good. But just the gesture makes everything funner. It makes everything more romantic. It makes everything, even if you're not romantically involved with somebody, it makes life more enjoyable. And so for Belle, who's stuck in this small town, and it's funny because everybody's like, why didn't she travel afterwards? Like, she didn't need the travel. She didn't need all that. She needed the Beast. She needed someone to make life exciting. And he gave that to her.
That's great.
Talking about the fact that she's in this village, I noticed this, and it's interesting because the hero's journey is generally perceived as a masculine tale, and the hero's journey always starts off with the hero being in a safe environment, and then called out to go out in beyond the borders and into the wilderness and find adventure. Right. It's actually starts with Abraham. Abraham's that story.
Right.
But Belle is the same story. And if you think about it, basically Gaston is Belle's only like eligible option in the village.
Right.
And Gaston sees her as basically the only eligible option for him. Right. Which is why he like demands that she's the girl. She's the most beautiful girl in town. She's the only one for me. Right. He kind of demands that she be the only one. Now, she ends up going on an adventure outside of the safety of the village, right? So in a sense, she's kind of it's a feminine hero's journey, right? Because she goes out there and she tames a beast.
Well,
Right.
and this Jordan Peterson has actually said this story is the female version of the hero's journey. And if you read any kind of romantic like Harlequin romances, almost all of he's actually said this in one of his lectures. It's like pirate, vampire, billionaire, surgeon, and there's one other one, but they're basically the same and they're like dangerous men that very virginal, beautiful, innocent woman. This is like 50 Shades of Grey. Like this,
Yeah.
like I don't want to degrade the actual story to that because that's all crap. But basically, it's the woman taming the man, taming the beast, and this is what over time has been the female version of the hero's journey. So it's basically the same thing. It's the female hero's journey, I would say.
Well, it's interesting because especially in postmodernism, they say men and women are the same. And if you notice the stories of the female journey versus the masculine journey, the beats are the same, but the approach is different. For instance, in the hero's journey, he's going out because he's naive and he needs to learn. He needs to go on. In every good story I've heard where the woman is removed from her safe town and has to go out, her character is already established. She is already, like in Belle's case, her character doesn't change. Her character is the same throughout that story, but the circumstances and what happens to her change. While the men, they're developing a character. They have to go out and they have to learn all these different things. While a woman, everything from Cinderella, of course, she doesn't get removed, but in a sense, she does. She goes to the ball, so she's taken out of the comfort of the sea. Beauty and the Beast, two good examples of that in classical literature is North and South and Pride and Prejudice, both of the powerful men and the woman, everything like that. But she has to actually develop her character before she can step out, because if she doesn't, that's when you end up with these girls are preyed on by the mind and emotion very, very easily. That's why you get these good girls that go to college and all of a sudden they're a blue-haired feminist screeching into the face of men about how they're oppressed. Well, a woman who already has a character established can step out into that, and no matter what happens to her, she can't be broken in that way. She will stand up and she'll still walk tall. While a man in his hero's journey is learning to walk tall. At least that's my viewpoint of it. So when young girls, they go out, you're like, okay, you need to be kind, you need to be generous, you need to have courage. You need to develop that now before you step into the world. While the men are usually restless and tend to not learn those things unless they step into the world.
And men tend to learn it later.
Right.
So have you heard this, that nature makes women into, or girls into women, and society makes men or boys into men?
I hadn't heard that, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Because
it's kind of, sorry, I was going to say it's kind of a play on the girls are born women, men are still boys.
Yeah.
But
society, and if you take that, then they're failing both, right?
they are failing both.
Society right now is like women. If you can take a drug now that keeps you from your body from developing,
right?
And then for men, if you spend all your time in the basement watching pornography and playing video games, you're not going to develop as a man. So we've infantilized our entire society.
Everybody's become like children. That's why Beauty and the Beast I thought was interesting, because a lot of it has to do with maturity.
Growing up.
Yeah. Growing up, Belle's already mature. The beast becomes mature, and Gaston never does. He never grows up.
He never grows up. And LeFou is definitely not a mature.
Yeah. I thought you said earlier, Michael, that LeFou was kind of the feminine masculine archetype, kind of like the feminine man. I found that interesting because it occurred to me that he hangs on to Gaston for protection. He kind of hangs on to Gaston like a woman would actually depend upon her man. But it's kind of a twisted relationship rather than a healthy one. And usually men who are weaker in stature learn strength through the pen or the word or some other means to be strong. LeFou never does. And he just kind of glums onto the strongest men to kind of like, hey, protect me. Hey, I'll cower behind you. And it's a twisted feminine trait, but it is twisted.
Well, it's, I think it kind of goes back to that archetype of the bully, right? Where you've got the bully and you've got the followers that just kind of are the yes men that kind of go along, right? And I feel like a healthy group of friends are a group of friends that will kind of challenge each other. They'll just be like, no, I don't think so, right? Like just and sometimes you have to agree to disagree with your group of friends, right? But I feel like the archetype of Gaston being a kind of a Chad, but also a bully, right? That guy he's gonna keep his group of friends are gonna be yes men and are gonna be aren't going to challenge him, right? The difference being with the beast has a group of people around him that challenge him, that kind of say no, do it this way, like
be better,
be better yourself, right? And some men out there will not be okay with that. They don't want their authority to be challenged. They don't want somebody to kind of push them to become better.
Well, and a lot of women are like that too. Like the whole body positivity movement that's going on, that's basically saying you're good, you are okay the way you are and you don't need to change.
Right? You don't have to improve yourself. You don't have to be better, which is a very arrogant mindset, because then you are claiming you are perfect. And therefore, if you're perfect, anybody who questions you, they're questioning moral righteousness. And it's just a disaster.
Yeah.
So you said that Belle kind of doesn't change throughout. Do you think that, because I always like characters that are flawed that become better, like they start out, do you think that there's any change that she goes through, maybe just accepting of something that's not
she
pretty?
does, but not by character, because if she had accepted beauty, she would have accepted Gaston. She, from the right point, looks don't matter to her. Like, I do not believe she is unaware she's beautiful. She probably knows she's beautiful. It's just not that important. And through the entire thing, Beast's behavior at the beginning, she kind of was like, well, I'm not coming to dinner with you, you're a jerk. It's not until Beast actually changes his behavior that she responds. And so her character is pretty well established. Yes, she does have room to grow. Like I said, she is flawed and everything like that. She will continue to grow. I was saying her character is established at the beginning.
Yeah.
While the Beast character and Gaston's character both develop as the story progresses.
Yeah. Well, and I just had this thought just barely. So the scene where she's being polite to Gaston and he's kind of barged into her house is different than the scene where the Beast and her argue, because she stands up for herself. Like
Yeah.
she doesn't give an inch. Like he's screaming into her face, and like it shows her hair kind of go back like this, and she does this, but she then goes, "But you should learn to control your temper." So there is a change there, right? So she's not letting like Gaston. She's being polite to Gaston to the point where she's just kind of squirreling around his
Advances.
aggressiveness, his
Yeah.
advances. Whereas the beast, she stands up like right to his face and doesn't give an inch. So is that
Well,
growth for the character right there, do you think?
um, yes, no growth because of the situation, but not necessarily, at least in my viewpoint, because Gaston at that point had actually done nothing to really warrant being rude to him, aggressively rude to him, or
Yeah.
in his face. He's the town jock who has a crush on me, and oh great, he's proposing. Okay, I'm going to let him down softly. Thanks, guess I just don't deserve you. The beast by that point, he had locked up her father, legally just, morally not just, but she had taken his place. He had terrorized her. He had frightened her away. She's like, okay, I'm not putting up with this. So the beast behavior at that point. But then you do see Belle actually stand up when Gaston does become a threat, when he starts taking her father. And she really, I mean, at first she turns to him, it's like, he's not crazy, Gaston. And then she finds out it's him. She shoves him away. It's like, never, I'm not going to marry you. And she immediately becomes that, where she puts those boundaries up and she gives back as good as she got. So, and like I said, I don't think that she is perfect. I do not think that she cannot grow, but it's kind of like at the end of a hero's journey in the traditional sense for a man, at the end, his character is established. He will continue to live on. He will continue to grow. He will continue to learn. But now his character is established of what kind of man he is and what kind of man he will become. Belle's character is kind of established at the beginning of what kind of woman she is already and what kind of woman she will become.
So could this be interesting? I find this really fascinating. So I wonder if the messaging is saying that a woman's character is built in the home and a man's character is built in the adventure.
Similar, I would think. Also, I would think, if I was to tell any woman out there, is if you want to tame a beast, you can't be learning these things while you're taming him. That would make you a hypocrite. If you want to tame a beast, you need to already be the lady, the woman that he would want. It's kind of like you hear this with OnlyFans and everything, like, well, I want this kind of guy. You're like, well, be the woman that kind of guy would want. It's the same thing with men here. Be the man that kind of woman would want. And so, and in Beauty and the Beast, Belle doesn't want him until he starts becoming that man. And if a woman wants to tame a beast, and it's funny because in this story, they're very clear, actually, if you watch it, the difference between the beast and Gaston. It's a foolish notion to tell women out there, you can tame anyone. It's the bad boy thing. Oh, I can fix him. No, you can't. You cannot fix him unless he wants to change. If he wants to change, you can inspire him. But if he doesn't, move on. Don't put up with that kind of bad behavior. And he may change later and find somebody else, or he may change later and come back to you. It doesn't matter. But with Gaston, she's not trying to fix Gaston. With the beast, she's not trying to fix the beast. Just her being who she is, it's inspiring them to be the greater versions of themselves. Gaston is a greater brute. He is a greater tyrant. The beast becomes tender. He's a greater man. He's a greater gentleman. He's a greater leader. And it's interesting because it is a fairy tale trope. But a lot of postmoderns reject this implicitly because they say it's unfair. Life's unfair sometimes. A good woman can inspire evil to be worse because they want to destroy the good. You see that in Sleeping Beauty.
And Macbeth.
So if you are a good woman and you're like, how did the stalker glum onto me? How did Gaston glum onto me? It was like very often they are trying to destroy something that is good. So you, just by being good, you can actually attract evil to you. But that shouldn't be an excuse not to be good, because you will also attract more good than ever evil exists. So it's, again, it falls into the fairy tale. You have to go through trial and adventure and horror sometimes, but only the strongest will get out on the other end. And so Belle does inspire Gaston, but not the way she intends, of course. I mean, no, I won't marry you. He becomes more evil, more controlling, more everything like that. And like you said, Michael, it's to control. He wants to control that beauty. He wants to control her. And so he will become worse while the Belle becomes better, or the Beast becomes better. And it's tragic that that happens in real life as well. And like you said, the Sound of Freedom, children are some of the biggest ones. They'll try to destroy the beauty. Sorry, go ahead.
And while I was going to say, I was just going to add to that with the Beast, he starts out controlling her and then lets go of the control. Mm-hmm. So he's that's the way to, she inspires him to let go of the control.
A woman cannot fix a man. She can only inspire him.
I wish I had it in front of me, but last time, or a couple times ago, Travis and I were talking about some stuff, and I had this book. It's called What is a Man, where the author talks about chivalry love, and he talks about how when you have a masculine, when he falls in love, if he does it right, he will try to improve himself in order to be worthy of the beauty of his lover's affections, right? Right. And I feel like that kind of, in essence, is the story of the Beast, because she's beautiful and she's kind. She's everything that he wants. And he's sitting there looking at himself and he's just like, what do I need to do? Look at me, right? Like, what do I need to do in order for me to win her affections? And that civilizes him.
Yeah, and the looks don't matter to her. Now, looks are different than from hygiene, from dress. If you notice, the Beast actually, he bathes, he dresses well, he starts improving that, but he's never going to change his face. And I will say that for women, most women, or I should say good women, do not care what your face looks like, because you'll grow older. You may, Michael, sorry, Travis, sorry, go bald. You may, yeah, you have all of these things. And so to them, that doesn't matter, but civilized does matter. Hygiene matters. Wearing clean clothes matters. Speaking well matters. Improving yourself matters. It's when you said the chivalry quote, there is a quote from the third book of the Scarlet Pimpernel that always interested me. And it's when the villain realizes that the two main characters, Percy Blakeney and Lady Blakeney, a husband and wife character, he can't break their love, because he realizes, he literally says, it was so simple that his was predicated on his chivalry and her on her trust. He was always chivalrous to her and she always trusted him. And it was that simple, and it was so strong that it couldn't be broken. And it's kind of the Beauty and the Beast. He starts taking care of her. He's very chivalrous. He starts thinking of her first and her appreciation, and she starts to trust him. And so, like you said, the chivalry, and my goodness, what you said about he wants to improve himself to be worthy of her. Mm-hmm. The same is for a woman. If she admires and trusts a man, she will try to improve herself to be worthy of his love. And that goes back into the cycle of the love ever growing, because you're not perfect. And also there's another quote that says that you will find yourselves equals in sin and in virtue. And then you can move on from there. Because if one is like Gaston, more sinful to Belle's virtue, they're not equal. While after the exchange, Beast and Belle are equal. They're different and they still have to learn, but they are equal. And they constantly try to be better for each other.
And hopefully that's what society comes back to.
Well, society has forgotten couples, I think. It's now, I'm all for individual freedom and liberty. I think the individual should never be put under the heel of the mob or society as a whole. However, it's built upon couples and family. And so if you have a man and woman together, there will always be more powerful, whether in love, whether in a small town, whether in a big city, whether in a company, than if they were just individuals. They could do more together.
So we need a
maybe before we wrap this up, I wanted to just say, so at the very beginning, this is just a thing I looked up. On the stained glass window, there is a Latin phrase, and I'm going to butcher it, but I'm going to try to read it. It says Vincent K.C. Vincent, which means in a rough form, he conquers who conquers himself.
The theme of Beauty and the Beast.
I thought that was really cool. I guess we'll wrap up. Michael, do you have any final thoughts?
I love that he conquers who conquers himself. We live in a day and age. It's Vincent. Vincent.
Yeah, you probably could pronounce it better. I'll send this to you.
Yeah, but we're watching. It's crazy, but it's like we're watching the demise of the battle of the sexes. We're just watching it all kind of fall apart in front of us, and a lot of it's like the advent of online dating, except hookup culture, right? Well, if he conquers who conquers himself, we on both ends, we've got hookup culture just throwing everything to the wind, with no internal breaks, internal morality, I guess. So it's tough to say how we fix this, but it seems like men becoming chivalrous and women becoming ladylike
might solve the problem.
Might be a good start.
Yeah, and don't view yourself as something just to be tried out. Have some hookup culture is really sad because it's basically that you're a product to be consumed or to consume another human being. You're just to be used and then tossed away. And I heard the comment once of, well, you would never buy a car without trying it out. And my first comment was, I'm not a car. I'm not just something to be used, and nor would I ever want to use somebody else that way, that they're just a toy for a couple of hours just to be tossed aside. So with chivalry, I have never met a chivalrous man who would have allowed himself to be treated that way. And I have never known of a ladylike woman who would allow herself to be treated that way. And that goes for those who have redeemed themselves from that culture, those who have walked away from that, who have partaken of it and done hookups when they were younger, and they said, you know what, that's enough for me. And then they were like, I will not be treated that way, and I will not treat another human being that way. So it's kind of like society's become like a beast, and we've lost control, and we need to rediscover our humanity in ourselves and in each other, or we may not. We may fall.
Complex beings deserve complexity. We are not cars.
Yeah, we're not cars to be driven. We can drive ourselves.
Heather, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Michael, what are our socials?
Follow us on Twitter at Brothers V Random. We're on Instagram. We're on Rumble at the Brothers Random. And you can email us, have us on your podcasts, and invite us to talk. But that's the Brothers Random V at Gmail.
Check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just look for The Sword in the Skull. Heather, maybe we could try this again with another fairy tale at some point, if you so enjoyed. We really appreciate you coming on. So
thank you.
Keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. We'll see you guys.
Yeah.